They say that love is blind, but looking back, I realize I wasn't just blind. I was completely, utterly deaf to the warning signs. I chose to ignore the cold whispers of doubt in my mind. For 7 long years, I lived in a beautiful house built entirely on a foundation of lies. My name is Clara, and the man I shared that house with was Julian. To the outside world, Julian was the perfect husband. He was charming, incredibly handsome, and possessed a smile that could melt the coldest heart. When he looked at me, I felt like the only woman in the universe. He was a rising star at a prestigious architectural firm in the city, and I was a dedicated high school English teacher. Together, we looked like the picture-fresh image of success and happiness. Our friends envied us. My family adored him. But perfection is often just a carefully painted mask, and Julian was a master of disguise. Our story began in college. We were college sweethearts, the kind of couple everyone expected to stay together forever. When he proposed to me on a rainy evening under a shared umbrella, I thought my life was completely set. I envisioned a future filled with children, growing old together, and rocking chairs on a front porch. I poured everything I had into our relationship. When Julian wanted to start his own boutique design firm, I didn't hesitate. I used my savings, the money my grandmother had left me, to fund his dream. I worked extra hours, tutoring students late into the night, just to ensure our household expenses were covered while his business got off the ground. I did it gladly, without a single complaint, because I believed his success was our success. I believed in his vision, but more importantly, I believed in him. The first few years of his business were tough, but Julian worked tirelessly. Or at least that's what he told me. He would come home late, his face lined with exhaustion, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and high-end restaurants. He explained that he had to wine and dine wealthy clients to secure the big contracts. I understood. I would have a warm plate of dinner waiting for him, rub his shoulders, and listen to him complain about how stressful his days were. "It's all for us, Clara," he would whisper, kissing my forehead. "Once the firm is established, we can finally slow down. We can start that family you've always wanted. Just give me a little more time." And I gave him time. I gave him years. As his firm began to grow, the late nights didn't stop. They actually increased. He started taking frequent weekend business trips to neighboring cities. "New developments," he would say casually while packing his designer leather suitcase. "The market is expanding, Clara. I have to strike while the iron is hot." I never doubted him. Why would I? He still bought me flowers on my birthday, still took me out for nice dinners when he was in town, and still told me he loved me every single day. I trusted him completely. My trust was a shield that kept out the cold reality of what was actually happening right under my nose. I was living in a comfortable, warm bubble of ignorance, completely unaware that the man I loved was systematically tearing down the life we had built together, brick by brick. The first crack in my perfect world appeared on a quiet Tuesday evening. Julian was away on another one of his mandatory weekend to Tuesday business trips to Chicago. He had left his personal iPad on the kitchen counter, something he rarely did. Usually, his devices were locked away or attached to his hip like an extra limb. I didn't think much of it until the screen lit up with a notification. It was a text message. I wasn't trying to spy, truly I wasn't. I just went to move it out of the way of some spilled water. But the preview on the lock screen caught my eye. It was from a contact saved simply as M.R. The message read, "The suite is booked for next weekend. Can't wait to see you, darling." Chicago was incredible. My breath hitched in my throat. My heart gave a sudden, violent thud against my ribs. Darling? Chicago was incredible? Julian was supposed to be in Chicago for a grueling corporate conference. He had told me he barely had time to eat, let alone enjoy himself. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I tried to unlock the device, but the passcode had been changed. Julian had always used our anniversary date, but that no longer worked. A cold dread began to wash over me, starting from the tips of my fingers and moving slowly to my heart. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe M.R. was a wealthy, eccentric client who used dramatic language? Maybe it was a mistake? A wrong number? I spent the rest of the night pacing the living room floor, trying desperately to convince myself that I was being paranoid. When Julian returned the next morning, he looked as handsome as ever. He kissed me deeply, handed me a gift bag from a high-end boutique in Chicago, and complained about how exhausted he was from the endless meetings. I looked at him, searching his face for any sign of guilt, any flicker of a lie. But his eyes were clear, his smile warm. "Julian," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady, "your iPad lit up last night. Someone named M.R. texted you about a suite next weekend." For a fraction of a second, just a tiny heartbeat of time, his smile froze. A dark shadow passed over his eyes, so fast I almost missed it. But then, just as quickly, he laughed. It was a rich, booming sound that usually made me feel safe. "Oh, that's just Marcus Reynolds," Julian said smoothly, walking into the kitchen to pour himself coffee. "He's the lead developer on the new hotel project. He's a bit old school and eccentric, uses words like darling with everyone. It's a British theater thing he does. We locked down the contract, Clara. The suite he's talking about is the presentation room for the board. It's huge news for the firm." He walked back to me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and looked down at me with pure affection. "Don't tell me my beautiful wife is getting jealous of an 60-year-old businessman?" I forced a laugh, burying my face in his chest. I wanted so badly to believe him. The explanation made sense, right? It was business. Julian wouldn't lie to me. He loved me. But deep down, in the darkest corners of my soul, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted. And once that seed takes root, it is almost impossible to stop it from growing. Over the next few months, that tiny seed of doubt grew into a towering tree of suspicion. I began to notice things I had previously ignored. Julian was suddenly very protective of his phone. He would never leave it face up on the table. If he left the room, the phone went with him, even if he was just going to fetch a glass of water. He started taking calls in the garage or walking deep into the backyard. His voice dropped to a low, intense whisper. When I asked who it was always work, always a difficult client. Our bank accounts also began to show strange patterns. Large amounts of cash were being withdrawn regularly. When I brought it up during our monthly budget review, Julian brushed it off with irritation, a stark contrast to his usual calm demeanor. "Clara, I am running a high-end business now," he said, his voice sharp. "I need to have cash on hand for tips, private dinners, and entertaining people who don't want everything on a corporate card. Stop monitoring me like a child. I am the one bringing in the majority of the income here." That comment stung deeply. I had supported him for years, given him my entire inheritance, and worked myself to the bone so he could build that very business. Now, because his firm was finally profitable, my contribution was reduced to nothing. The emotional distance between us grew wider by the day. He was physically present sometimes, but his mind was always somewhere else. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped looking at me with that warmth that had once been my anchor. One Friday evening, Julian told me he had to fly to Miami for an emergency meeting with a new investor. He left in a rush, kissing my cheek hastily before slamming the front door. Something inside me snapped that night. I couldn't live with the suffocating weight of uncertainty anymore. I needed to know the truth, even if that truth broke me. I called my closest friend, Sarah. Sarah was a private investigator who usually handled corporate background checks, but she loved me like a sister. Through tears, I confessed my fears to her. I told her about the text message, the cash withdrawals, the secrecy, and the sudden shift in Julian's behavior. Sarah listened patiently, her voice filled with gentle anger on my behalf. "Clara, listen to me," she said firmly. "You deserve peace of mind. If he's innocent, then a little digging will prove it and you can rest easy. But if he's lying, you need to protect yourself. Let me do some research. I'll check his flight details and his business filings. Just stay calm and act normal." I spent the weekend in a state of suspended animation. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped into my throat. On Monday morning, while I was sitting at my kitchen table staring blankly at a cup of cold coffee, Sarah knocked on my door. One look at her face, and I knew my life was changed forever. She didn't have her usual her eyes were filled with profound pity and deep rage. She carried a thick manila folder in her hands. Sarah sat down opposite me and gently placed the folder on the table. She took my hands in hers. Their warmth felt miles away. "Clara, I am so sorry," she whispered. "Julian is not in Miami, and he has never worked with anyone named Marcus Reynolds." The room seemed to spin. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Where is he?" Sarah opened the folder, revealing photographs, bank statements, and legal documents. "He is currently at a luxury resort in the Bahamas. And he isn't alone. He's been traveling with a woman named Maya Vance. She's a 24-year-old lifestyle influencer." I stared at the photographs. There was Julian, my husband, walking along a white sandy beach, his arm wrapped tightly around a beautiful, young woman. They were laughing, looking at each other with the same intensity and love that he used to reserve for me. In another picture, they were kissing passionately on the balcony of a private villa. My breath left my body in a sharp, agonizing gasp. It felt as if a physical blade had been plunged directly into my chest and twisted. The pain was so intense I couldn't even cry. I just stared at the images, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. "There's more, Clara," Sarah said, her voice dropping lower, filled with absolute disgust. "This isn't just a recent fling. Julian has been seeing Maya for over 3 years. He bought her a luxury apartment downtown, and he didn't use his business revenue to buy it. He's been systematically transferring money out of your joint accounts, draining the equity from this house, and moving funds into a private offshore account under a shell company." I forced myself to look at the financial documents Sarah pointed to. Line after line showed massive transfers. The home equity line of credit we had opened to renovate the kitchen had been entirely cleared out. The savings account I had maintained since college was empty. Julian hadn't just betrayed my heart. He had financially hollowed me out. He was planning to leave me, but not before stripping me of every single cent I owned. "He's planning a clean break, Clara," Sarah explained, her fingers tracing a legal document. "He's been working with a lawyer to draft divorce papers. He's setting it up so that his business appears to be completely broke on paper, meaning you wouldn't get a dime of alimony or business assets, while all the actual wealth is hidden safely away in Maya's name and the offshore account. He was going to serve you these papers next month, right after his 35th birthday." The shock slowly began to recede, replaced by a strange, icy coldness that spread through my veins. The man I had loved for a decade, the man I had sacrificed my youth and financial stability for, was not just a cheater. He was a monster. He had looked me in the eye every night, told me he loved me, eaten the food I cooked, and accepted my comfort, all while actively plotting my complete financial and emotional ruin. I stood up from the table. My tears dried instantly under the fierce heat of a new emotion that was blooming inside me. Pure, unadulterated rage. "He thinks he's so smart," I whispered, my voice sounding completely different, hollow and sharp as broken glass. Sarah looked up at me, a dangerous glint appearing in her own eyes. "What do you want to do, Clara? We can go to a divorce lawyer right now and fight this." "No," I replied, looking down at the pictures of Julian smiling on the beach. "A standard legal battle is exactly what he expects. He has a high-priced lawyer and hidden assets. If I file for divorce now, he'll scramble to freeze everything and I'll be left fighting for crumbs for years. No, Julian wants to play a game of chess. He thinks I'm just a pawn. He has no idea I've been studying the board." I spent the next 2 weeks acting completely normal. It was the hardest thing I have ever done in my entire life. When Julian returned from his Miami trip, looking tan and relaxed, I welcomed him home with a smile. I made his favorite dinner. I listened to him lie about the fictional investors he had met. Every time he touched my shoulder or kissed my cheek, my skin crawled with intense revulsion, but I forced myself to smile through the disgust. I was an actress playing the role of the dutiful, trusting wife, and I performed flawlessly. Meanwhile, Behind the scenes, Sarah and I worked tirelessly to build our counteroffensive. We didn't just want a divorce, we wanted absolute justice. We needed to ensure that Julian's house of cards collapsed so spectacularly that he could never rebuild it. First, we targeted his hidden wealth. Sarah used her forensic accounting skills to trace the shell company Julian had set up. The company was named Apex Designs LLC. Julian had mistakenly linked his personal email as a backup recovery for the shell company's accounts. A small, arrogant mistake. With Sarah's technical expertise, we gained access to the digital ledgers of Apex Designs. We found proof of over $2 million transferred from our joint marital funds and his architecture firm into this hidden account. Every single transaction was documented, downloaded, and saved in multiple secure cloud locations. Next, we looked into his architecture firm. Julian prided himself on his professional reputation above all else. He loved being the celebrated, innovative architect. But as we dug deeper into his recent projects, we discovered something truly scandalous. To cut costs and maximize his personal payouts to fund his lavish lifestyle with Maya, Julian had been using cheaper, substandard materials on a major commercial building project downtown, a new luxury shopping complex. He had forged the safety inspection documents and paid off a local low-level inspector to sign off on the structural integrity. When Sarah showed me the altered blueprints and the digital trail of bribes, I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just corporate greed. This was a massive public safety hazard. Julian was willing to risk the safety of thousands of innocent people just to buy designer bags for his mistress and maintain his illusion of wealth. "This is it," I whispered to Sarah, my eyes fixed on the forged documents. "This is how we dismantle him completely. His money, his mistress, his reputation. We take it all at once." We carefully crafted a plan. We needed the perfect stage, the perfect moment where Julian would be at his most confident, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. That perfect moment was just around the corner. Julian's 35th birthday party. Julian had planned a massive, extravagant gala at a high-end country club to celebrate his birthday and the upcoming launch of his new commercial project. He had invited all his wealthy clients, city officials, investors, the local press, and all our friends and family. He wanted to use the evening to solidify his status as the city's premier architect. He had even insisted that I wear a beautiful, expensive dress he bought for me, wanting me to look the part of the supportive, elegant wife next to the great man. I accepted the dress with a gracious smile. "Oh, I will wear it, Julian, and I will make sure it's a night you will never, ever forget." The night of the gala arrived. The country club was transformed into a glittering paradise of crystal chandeliers, white roses, and ambient lighting. Over 200 guests filled the grand ballroom. Waiters in tuxedos carried silver trays of champagne and expensive appetizers. Julian was in his element. He wore a custom-tailored tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, moving through the crowd with absolute confidence, laughing loudly, shaking hands with city council members, and flashing his winning smile at potential investors. I stood by his side for the first hour, playing my part to perfection. I smiled, nodded, and listened to people tell me how incredibly lucky I was to have such a brilliant, successful husband. "Clara, you two are truly couple goals," one of our old college friends remarked, holding a glass of champagne. 7 years, and he still looks at you like you're the only woman in the room. I took a slow sip of my drink, looking over at Julian, who was currently deep in conversation with a wealthy real estate mogul. "Yes," I said softly, a sharp edge hidden beneath my pleasant tone. "Julian is full of surprises. You never truly know what a man is capable of until the right moment." As the evening progressed, I noticed a young woman slip into the back of the ballroom. It was Maya. She was wearing a stunning, attention-grabbing red dress that directly contrasted with my elegant, understated navy gown. She didn't mingle with the main crowd. Instead, she stood near the bar, watching Julian with a proprietary smirk. Julian caught her eye from across the room and gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. My heart didn't even hurt anymore. The sight of her just reinforced the cold steel of my resolve. He had actually invited his mistress to his birthday gala. right under my nose, completely confident that I was too stupid and oblivious to ever notice. His arrogance was his ultimate downfall. At 9 p.m., the chime of a silver spoon against a crystal glass echoed through the room. It was time for the keynote presentation. Julian was scheduled to take the stage to give a speech about his career, present a digital showcase of his new luxury commercial complex, and thank his supporters. Julian walked up the steps to the stage, bathing in the warm glow of the spotlight. The crowd erupted into loud applause. He stood behind the podium, smiling warmly, holding up his hands to quiet the audience. Thank you everyone, Julian began, his voice rich and charismatic through the microphone. To see so many friends, colleagues, and partners in this room tonight is truly overwhelming. Success is never a solo journey. It takes vision, dedication, and the right people by your side. He looked directly at me in the front row, giving me a warm, loving look that made my stomach turn. I want to start by thanking my beautiful wife, Clara. Without her unwavering support, none of this would be possible. The crowd murmured with admiration, a few people clapping. I simply smiled back, my eyes fixed on him like a hawk watching its prey. And tonight, Julian continued, gesturing to the massive projector screen behind him, I want to share with you the crown jewel of my career, the new downtown plaza, a testament to modern design, safety, and architectural excellence. Let's take a look at the future of our city. Julian clicked the remote control in his hand, expecting the promotional video of his grand project to begin playing. But Sarah was in the control booth at the back of the room, and she had a completely different file ready for the screen. The projector screen flickered and then went bright white. Julian smiled, waiting for the high-end 3D rendering to appear. But instead of a beautiful building, a massive, crystal-clear photograph filled the screen. It was the picture of Julian and Maya, kissing passionately on the balcony of their private villa in the Bahamas, complete with a time and date stamp from just 1 week ago. A sudden, sharp gasp rippled through the ballroom. The collective intake of breath from 200 people was deafening. The murmurs started instantly, a low, buzzing sound of utter shock. Julian's smile froze instantly. He whirled around to look at the screen, his face turning a sickly, pale white. What? What is this? Julian stammered into the microphone, his voice cracking with sudden panic. There seems to be a technical issue. Control booth. Turn that off. But the screen didn't turn off. Instead, it changed to a new slide. This one showed the legal documents of Apex Designs LLC, explicitly listing Julian as the sole owner, alongside bank statements showing millions of dollars being drained from our joint accounts and routed to offshore bank accounts. Right next to the financial records were screenshots of text messages between Julian and Maya, discussing how they were going to leave me penniless and blind-sided after his birthday. The ballroom descended into absolute chaos. People were whispering furiously, pointing at the screen, and then looking at Julian, then at me. My parents stood there, their mouths wide open in complete horror. Julian's business partners were staring at the financial documents with sudden, intense alarm. Julian completely lost his composure. He dropped the remote control, stepping out from behind the podium. This is a joke. This is a malicious hack. He shouted desperately into the microphone, his hands shaking violently. Clara, you know this isn't true. Someone is trying to destroy me. I didn't say a word. I simply stood up from my seat in the front row. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea as I walked slowly, calmly, towards the stage. Every eye in the room was locked onto me. The silence that fell over the ballroom was absolute, heavy with expectation. I walked up the steps of the stage, my heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor. I walked right up to Julian, who was sweating profusely, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. He looked at me, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes, silently begging me to save him from this public nightmare. I reached out and gently took the microphone from his trembling hand. I turned to face the audience, my voice echoing clearly through the high-end sound system. Good evening, everyone, I said, my voice completely steady, calm, and conversational. I want to apologize for the interruption to the presentation, but as Julian said, success is about vision and the right people by your side. And tonight, I wanted to ensure you all saw his true vision. I turned slightly to look at the massive screen behind us, which had just switched to its final, most devastating slide. It displayed the forged structural safety certificates for the Downtown Plaza project, highlighted side by side with the real engineering reports showing the substandard materials Julian had approved to line his own pockets. Right below it was the transaction history of the bribes paid to the building inspector. Julian didn't just betray his marriage, I said, looking out at the horror-stricken faces of his business partners and the city officials. He betrayed his clients, his investors, and the safety of this entire community. He built his career the exact same way he built his marriage, on a foundation of dangerous, calculated lies. The moment those words left my mouth, two men in dark suits stepped into the back of the ballroom. They weren't party guests. They were federal investigators from the Financial Crimes Division, accompanied by local police officers. Sarah had delivered the complete file of financial fraud and structural forgery to their offices earlier that afternoon. They had simply waited for the public exposure to make their move. Julian saw them approaching, and total terror filled his eyes. He stumbled backward, knocking over the podium. The microphone fell to the floor with a loud, screeching feedback whine that echoed painfully through the room. Julian Vance, one of the investigators, called out, his voice booming across the silent ballroom. You need to come with us for questioning regarding corporate fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Julian looked around the room, frantically searching for an escape route, for an ally, for anyone to help him. But there was no one. His wealthy clients were already walking away, trying to distance themselves from the immediate scandal. His business partners looked at him with absolute fury, realizing their own reputations were now in severe jeopardy. And at the back of the room, Maya was quickly slipping out the side door, desperate to avoid being tied to his sudden downfall. She didn't look back at him once. The young woman he had traded his marriage for abandoned him the very second the money and prestige vanished. As the police officers stepped onto the stage and escorted a completely shattered, silent Julian away, he looked back at me one final time. The mask of the charming, invincible architect was entirely gone. In its place was a broken, desperate man who realized he had lost everything. I stood on that stage watching him go. I didn't feel a rush of wild happiness. I didn't feel like celebrating. What I felt was a profound, deep sense of relief. The heavy weight of doubt and suspicion that had suffocated me for months was completely gone. The truth was out in the open, and the air felt clean again. The aftermath was swift and total. Julian's architecture firm collapsed within 48 hours. His assets, including the offshore account we had uncovered, were immediately frozen by the court. Because Sarah and I had secured the undeniable proof of his financial dissipation before he could file his fraudulent divorce papers, the family court judge awarded me the entirety of our remaining domestic assets, including the full value of our home and a substantial portion of the recovered funds from the shell company. Julian was ultimately convicted of corporate fraud and structural forgery. He was sentenced to a significant term in federal prison. His name, once synonymous with luxury and success, became a cautionary tale in the city's architectural community. The Downtown Plaza project was stripped from his firm, audited, and rebuilt safely by an honorable company. A year has passed since that fateful night at the gala. I sold the big house filled with old, hollow memories and moved to a beautiful, sun-drenched cottage closer to the coast. I still teach English, and my students bring a joy to my life that no amount of material wealth ever could. I used a portion of the recovered funds to establish a scholarship foundation for young women pursuing careers in structural engineering and architecture, ensuring that something good, safe, and honest would come out of the wreckage Julian left behind. Sometimes, I sit on my new front porch, watching the waves crash against the shore, and reflect on the long journey I took to get here. Betrayal is a terrible, agonizing fire. It burns away your trust, your confidence, and the reality you thought you knew. But fire also purifies. It burns away the illusions, leaving behind only what is real and strong. Julian tried to build a life on lies, manipulation, and the exploitation of the person who loved him most. He believed that success was measured by the size of his bank account, the youth of his companion, and the height of his buildings. But true architecture, whether in a structure or in a human life, requires a solid, honest foundation. If you build your life on deception, it doesn't matter how grand or beautiful the building looks from the outside. Eventually, the weight of the truth will cause the entire thing to come crashing down around you. I learned that revenge isn't about matching someone's malice or acting out of blind, uncontrolled anger. True revenge, true justice, is stepping out of the dark, refusing to be a victim, and allowing the unyielding light of the truth to dismantle the lies. I survived the collapse of my old world, and from the rubble, I built a new life. And this time, it is built on a foundation that nothing can ever shake.